Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining the latest session of our OIE meetups. Today's session is going to be a little more casual. This is an Ask Me Anything session. We have a panel of experts here from our product acceleration team. Do some quick intros. So first of all, I'm joined as always by Dimitri from our product marketing team. And today we have some special guests with us from our product acceleration team. Andy, Dan, Rashir, and Asha, the brains of the operation, have joined us to basically tackle any questions that you guys have. My name is Brent Arrington. I'm also from the product acceleration team, and together we'll all be basically taking any questions that you guys have. We had a couple questions that were submitted in advance, so we'll kick things off with those. Before we get into the questions, I do want to, well, actually, before we dive into the questions, I do want to give a quick note on some logistics. In the Zoom webinar, you should see a Q&A section. If you would please, if you have questions, submit those into the Q&A, and our panelists will be reviewing the Q&A, and we'll select questions that are submitted live to address. When you submit the questions, you do have an option to either submit anonymously if you want, or you can identify yourself if you want. If you do identify yourself, the benefit is that if we need some clarification or follow-up, we know who to unmute so that you can ask your question via audio. With that, I will start with, we had a couple questions that are sort of common questions that we see pretty frequently from our office hours and just through field team questions that are relayed from customers, et cetera. And two of the most common ones revolve around these two blockers. These are very common, I guess, acknowledgement items that get called out as part of the upgrade tooling. So I wanted to address these for starters, and then we can dive into the audience questions. So we'll give a little bit of time for folks to start submitting questions via the Q&A, and we'll get kind of a queue of questions built up. And in the meantime, I'll cover these two that we see pretty often. So the first question, and this is one that comes up pretty frequently, is around the optional factor enrollment setting for email factor. Let me break out of this really quick, and I'm gonna go over to, I'm actually gonna log into an org here and show you what this would look like. So this one, if you're on Classic still, the recommendation here is actually very straightforward. If you're on Classic, there is a feature flag that you'll find under settings and features, which you should enable if you have not. So for starters, if you're in the Classic tenant and you go to, let me see, here we go. If you go to settings and features, there's a feature flag for enable optional email enrollment for OIE. If you're in Classic, turn this on. This feature flag has zero impact at all on Classic. It only affects OIE, and the effect that it has in OIE is to basically make the behavior of the optional setting for email enrollment very much like the Classic behavior that you currently have today. So if you're in Classic today, there's no reason not to turn this on. It has zero impact in Classic. And what it does is it changes the email blocker from a config item where you would have had to change your setting to either required or disabled to just an acknowledgement item. So step one, if you're in Classic, is turn this on. And then step two, if you go to your dashboard and check out your OIE upgrade hub, you'll see that you now have this acknowledgement item. And the phrasing here is a little bit confusing because it makes it sound like there is a change. the change in behavior is really a change in what the behavior would have been in OIE had you not turned that feature flag on. The catch here is that what the behavior would have been in OIE is different from what you currently have today in Classic. So in reality, all you've done is make it so that the behavior that you will see once you upgrade is very much the same as the behavior that you have today in Classic. So if you see this, if you see either a config item related to email, then you go and turn that feature flag on. And then once you've turned that on, you'll get this acknowledgement item. And this one is one that you can safely acknowledge and submit because it's really not going to impact you negatively in any way. It's actually keeping the behavior that you have today in Classic very much the same as it already is. All right, now the second most common question that we have, and I don't know if I have an example here.
Before you move on, Brent,
Yes.
there's actually a related question.
Yep.
When you just covered in the chat.
Okay.
What exactly end users will be prompted after the upgrade to OIE for the secondary email?
So that is a possibility that is unrelated to that email configuration that I just showed you. The secondary email would be related to whether or not, well, a couple things. One, whether or not you have that field enabled. So under customizations and other, there is a section for optional user account fields. If you have secondary email enabled, and if you have under your password policies, so under security and authentication for your password policies, if you have self-service account recovery enabled, so if you have the ability to change, reset, and or unlock enabled, if those two things are true and a user does not have a value set for the secondary email, so when the user came on board, maybe these settings weren't in place and they weren't prompted to set it or whatever the reason, if you have any users that don't have a value set for secondary email, then they could get prompted to set one on the first login after the upgrade. So there, there are a few obvious ways to avoid that, which may be more or less palatable to you depending on your specific use cases. One is just to disable that field. If you're not really using secondary email, like if you really don't allow or encourage users to set a secondary email, this is particularly common I've seen with customers who are doing delegated auth to Active Directory. They may have that field mapped in from Active Directory from a field that has nothing in it. And so that may be why it has no value there. In those situations, a lot of times you're really not even using it for anything. So it's probably safe to just turn that field off and disable it altogether. And that would avoid the potential prompts. You could also, if you wanted to have it set, you could potentially turn off the self-service recovery options temporarily before during the upgrade and then re-enable it. You could programmatically via the API set some dummy value for those that don't have it. There are a number of options. And then, the most straightforward thing may just be to communicate that to your end users. We all know how end users are about reading things, but it's shouldn't be terribly disruptive. It's just a prompt that they can move past if they need be. But yeah, there's a combination of factors that would have to be true in order for that prompt to happen for a user.
Hey, can you show them how secondary email is disabled, Brent?
Yep. Yeah, so that's back on the screen I was on before. So if we go back to customizations and other, there's a section here for optional user account fields. You can edit here and you can either enable or disable the secondary email field. All right.
Yeah.
Actually, while we're here, kind of a slightly related topic. One other change that users will see in OIE is security image. If you're using that currently in Classic, security image goes away entirely. regardless of whether you have it enabled or disabled in Classic. It's just not a thing in OIE. So that may be another slight change you want to communicate to end users, just if they're accustomed to seeing it.
One thing I want to add to the secondary email, if you are in fact using that secondary email for like an activation flow, so you can't just disable it, you need to have something in the fields for the folks that have a null value after upgrade to avoid it. So disabling it is by far the easiest path. But if you did need it for, let's say if you have a new hire activation flow, or you need it for a recovery flow, you can't disable it, just adding even if it's a null, like a blank email box, you can add them to them. So maybe a little bit more work to do that, but it's an alternative way to.
Right. All right.
You want me to take? I can take one of the. There's a question regarding about asking about wanting being able to test the customized Okta hosted sign-in widget. We're getting that message as your blocker. Your lower environment and your preview environment and your production environments are both used widely. So you don't want to upgrade your lower environment until you know that custom sign-in widget is in fact working. So you don't have a situation where you put them into a bad spot. The easiest way to, if you do have a situation where you upgrade like a lower environment and to avoid a rollback, is if you just go back to the default login. That's easy, right? Then you have to iterate it back in, but you may not want to do that. There may be something that's actually involved there. What you can do is you can grab one of our developer sites and register the domain and turn on the custom address, the custom domain, and copy your just the login page there. That way you can see if it does function. Put a single app out there and you can see how it does function. That may be the again, two methods. One, if it doesn't work, you can one of our default methods is to revert back to the base. The second is to if you can grab a developer site, set it up, and you can test it to your heart's content over there until you know exactly what code needs to be changed. Even if it does, many times it doesn't, but if it doesn't work, you can iterate on it on that front.
Yeah.
Also, you don't need to get a cert. Okta actually will give you a cert.
Yes.
Like we manage our own. Like we have a way to manage certs. So if you don't want to pay for a cert for a developer site, you definitely don't need to. Just use the Okta managed cert, and that way it saves you some money. For your production ones, of course, you can use whatever cert service you guys are already using, but just want to call that out as a easier method. And also, if you have to go through a lot of QA approval process for certifications and stuff like that for domains, you may want to just get a IT or IM level domain and just use a fake dummy domain, and basically do that. Like a lot of the stuff that for us in our team, when we are testing out stuff and we're using custom domains, we have nothing linked to Okta. They're domains that are owned by us, and we just mess around with them. That way we have full autonomy to mess around and create certs and stuff like that. So it might make your testing a little easier there as well.
Yeah, for sure. The DNS is usually the bigger question, because I can't get a company domain name versus a something like that. I have byodomain.com, right? Like bring your own domain.
Yeah, good call outs. And in case if you're not familiar with it, where you would get to that code is under your customizations brands. And then wherever you have you can have multiple brands now, but wherever you have your custom branded Okta login page, you would go to that URL, that brand, and go to configure for sign-in page, and you can get the code here. One thing to note about that acknowledgement item is that it is triggered by any change whatsoever in this page. So just because you see that call out does not necessarily mean that you have anything that's going to cause a problem, or even any substantial changes to, or customizations to the widget. Literally, even a comment in here would trigger that, like an HTML comment or a JavaScript comment would trigger that validator. So it may not be anything, but you do definitely want to test it against an OIE tenant prior to upgrading. All right. Does anybody else have a question queued up? I know we had there were a couple that were submitted ahead of time in the on the community site, and I think Harry, I think you had submitted a few of those. Let's maybe let's address some of those. I think
I think Rocher volunteered to take the JAMF Connect question.
Yeah. So looks like you have JAMF Connect connected for your Macs. So you can create a policy essentially for the first login, or create a policy across all your per app policies to say, okay, if you log in using an auth for a certain amount of hours, so if you say my work day hours is going to be 8 hours or 10 hours, you can set a policy that says, hey, if there's an Okta session or they've authed, you can set a policy in all your per app policies to say that. And yes, once they auth in once and they've satisfied the MFA, your end users won't need to re-auth again inside of Okta, and they should be able to just go to app and not have any issues. But you can also, if for instance, if you wanted to do that and then you have a up level, so let's say your first auth in is just SMS, and then you have another application later in the day that they're trying to log into that requires Okta Verify push or a FIDO key, then they will get prompted for that because there is an up level there. So if the first auth throughout the whole day is, if that satisfies it, if the first one you want to push them to is Okta Verify push or a FIDO, you can set up your policies to basically not ask for an MFA for the 8-10 hour window that you set. Now, if an end user is going to work more than 10 hours in a day or starts their day, in a weird way, then yes, they'll get prompted twice, but that's outside of that 10 hour. Hopefully that answered your question. Let us know. And then for Harry, how does large? Did we answer that?
No, yeah, you throw it into our slide, our channel, just so you didn't lose it.
Okay. So graceful transition. Are we talking about desktop device trust, or are we talking about mobile device trust, Harry?
Ooh, I think we have to.
I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, desktop.
Okay, it's desktop. Okay. So for desktop, it is actually going to be graceful in a sense. So when you have desktop device trust, what's going to happen is your it's going to continue with the OIE upgrade, right? So you can upgrade with desktop device trust on, and it's just going to go ahead. And when you upgrade to OIE, you'll see legacy platform. What you want to do is once you are in OIE and you verified all your other use cases and all that kind of stuff is all working, and there's no reason, for fingers crossed, a rollback or other issues that are cropping up. What you then want to do is you want to plan to move over to the OIE device trust. So moving to OIE with desktop device trust, there is no, you don't have to stop it. You don't have to really make any changes or anything like that. But what you will do is once you're in OIE, you will then follow the steps to basically enable FastPass, and then roll out, configure the MDM side of the equation. So make sure you've set up Okta and your MDM for the SCEP URL. Once that's out there, you also want to make sure that you have your certificate being pushed down to the devices first before you start having end users enroll in and registering for FastPass. Once they do all of that, then you can move all your end users into OIE device trust and then turn off your legacy platform, as well as now you can go ahead and decommission your IWA agents as well, because they won't be needed. If you have any more questions, we can actually unmute you. Let us know in the Q&A, and I'll unmute you if you have any additional questions.
To follow up on that, just a very important factor though is to not not get rid of the on-prem IWA servers until you are confirmed that everything is upgraded.
And Harry did, Harry had a few from the pre-submissions. I don't, Brent, you want to just jump into that real quick since we have Harry on the line?
Yeah.
Yep, let's do that. So let's see, I have these up here in our Slack channel. So let's see, I think, did we address the first one, the JAMF Connect question?
Yeah, that one's done.
Yeah, that's okay. Between an admin account and a normal user account, you're seeing different results. So I suspect we would kind of have to take a look at exactly what's happening here. I suspect what's happening is that it's defaulting to the other like the other authenticator, because that's what you had previously used. So short answer to your question is no, there's no difference in the way that FastPass is treated between admins versus normal users. I think the reason you're seeing it default to the other authenticator for the admin account is likely just because that was the last authenticator used on that browser for that admin. At least that's my suspicion, but I would have to see it specifically. But there should be no difference in the way that FastPass behaves between admins versus normal accounts. And then the next one, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying there might be slight differences if the end user doesn't have like a onboard fingerprint reader and stuff like that. Like it's more hardware dependent where you may see a little bit of differences there. So depending on your type of hardware you have, but you're right, no admin and end user.
Yeah.
I do want to call out there might be a little bit of differences, like if you're using it in a VM or something like in a VDI environment, there might be slight differences on how FastPass interacts and changes, but not for admin and end user. It's more going to be on the device itself.
Yeah. And then the next question was around mobile device trust and the app level rules that exist for mobile device trust. So the short answer, so I guess to summarize, the question is, do you have to go to every single app and modify or remove those, like any mobile managed device rules on the apps? And what would the impact be if you didn't? So basically the impact, if you like for mobile device trust, you do have to turn it off entirely prior to upgrading. It's not like desktop device trust where you can have that sort of graceful transition from classic to OIE device trust. For mobile device trust specifically, you do have to completely disable it before you will be allowed to schedule the upgrade to upgrade, and then you re-enable it using the OIE centric method. The impact of that would be dependent on how you have your rule structured. So essentially what happens is once you turn off the mobile device trust in order to unblock your path to upgrading, any mobile devices that previously had been seen as managed devices would no longer be seen as managed devices. So they would, the rules that are in place for managed devices, if they are still there, would not apply anymore. So the exact impact would depend on what the next applicable rule would be, right? So in some cases, customers will set that up where, they have a rule for managed devices, and then they have a corresponding rule for unmanaged mobile devices where access is completely blocked, or maybe it's just, maybe it's just prompting for MFA. The exact impact on customers is going to, or on your users, is going to depend on exactly how you have your policies constructed. But at a high level, the impact is that mobile devices that previously were seen as managed would no longer be seen as managed, and any managed rules specifically you have in place would not be the rules that would evaluate. It would fall to whatever is the next rule, next applicable rule in line. Hopefully that answers your question.
One caveat to that is if you have your per app policies in Classic that have both the mobile devices and desktop devices in the same policy, then you will want to break those out. So what you can use is you can use the Rockstar plugin, and you can download or it will export all your per app policies in Classic Rockstar plugin doesn't really work. That functionality doesn't work in OIE, but what you can do is if you have the Rockstar plugin, you can use that to export all your per app policies in Classic and take a look. What you want to be very cognizant of is essentially if you have when you in Classic, you're able to have a policy, trusted policy for both iOS, or sorry, for mobile devices as well as desktop devices. If you have your policy set to both in one policy, you will need to go ahead and uncheck that. You will need to break them out because what's going to happen is if you don't do that, I've seen customers have issues. So if you as long as you have two different policies inside your per app policies in Classic, saying one for mobile device trust for mobile and then device trust for desktop, the mobile stuff should go away as soon as you turn it off.
I see there was a follow-up question around the mobile device trust. The question is, do you have to remove the Okta Mobile app and or the Okta Verify app on devices prior to the upgrade? No, you do not. In the case of Okta Mobile, the Okta Mobile app will simply stop working once you upgrade the tenant to OIE. So any users that are using Okta Mobile for the mobile desktop, like the mobile dashboard experience, they would just no longer be able to authenticate through that app. Functionally, they'll be able to get the same functionality through the native mobile browser. So they'll be able to log into your org and see the same dashboard. It's a mobile-friendly view through the native mobile browsers. The only caveat to that is if you're using any SWA applications, and those are the apps where Okta is acting as a credential vault essentially, and just inserting or injecting those credentials into the login form for you. That credential injection relies on, well, in a full desktop browser, it would use a browser plugin, but on mobile devices, since there are no plugins for the native mobile browsers, that's where the Okta Mobile app came into play. So since it was using the embedded browser, it was able to do that credential injection. So that functionality would not work. It usually is not a big deal for most customers. Mostly those are personal apps. The one use case that we do see fairly commonly for that would be like shared social media accounts. So like if you have a shared corporate Twitter account or LinkedIn account or whatever, and you're using a SWA application where the credentials are set by the admin and just shared to multiple people on a team, that would be one use case that might be impacted. Again, that would only be on mobile devices. It would continue to work just fine on a full desktop. It would just be the mobile devices that would be impacted there. And then as far as Okta Verify, any users that have Okta Verify already installed, there's no change at all there. The only potential change they might see after you upgrade to OIE would be if you decide after upgrading that you want to enable FastPass. Those users that have Okta Verify already installed on their mobile devices would see an option to enable FastPass as a authentication method. Otherwise, there's no change at all. No need to uninstall. No need to re-enroll or anything like that.
I just wanted to add one bit about the device trust for mobile upgrade. So there is a feature called the bring your own secret, right? Which is where you can pre-deploy that secret out to those mobile devices via your MDM solution before the upgrade happens, right? So I know that there's a lot of, what we would consider, time between being upgraded and, being ready to roll out mobile device trust. That's one of the things that can speed that up, especially if you're in a very large environment where you have multiple devices and it takes a while to do something via an MDM, like push out your secret for that. So I dropped a link into the chat that talks about that a little bit.
Yeah, and so once you're upgraded to OIE, this is where that option would be. It's under the device integrations. You've got for the mobile platforms, you've got an option to use an existing secret key. So if you capture your existing key, you can go ahead and use that here. Let's see. I saw a question. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say there was one question also with the IWA that Andy, I think you alluded to that before. if you're utilizing the IWA agent for Windows devices, the functionality doesn't go, you don't have to disable that until you're permanently on Identity Engine, right? That's it. It would still be used until you completely shift over. So you don't shut it off right away.
Yeah, the only requirement is for you to delete the routing rule for actual desktop SSO to log your users in via Kerberos. You would disable that or delete that before you upgrade to OIE. But your IWA servers still stay on-prem and are still actually functioning for your device trust stuff.
And there was one last follow-up question. I don't know if that got answered. I think you might have answered that one. It was around if you want to clarify, since the doc says, if you have an explicit mobile trust rule on all of your apps, we need to go through each app and remove these individual trust rules in addition to turning off mobile device trust as an option. Is that I believe we were talking about that it migrates it over.
Yeah, so I think I touched on that. I don't know if it was clear or not, but you don't necessarily have to remove those rules, but the impact would be that any rule that is calling out specifically a managed mobile device, like none of the devices that previously were seen as managed would any longer be seen as managed once you disable that. And the exact impact would be dependent on what how the rest of your policies are structured. So basically, if the managed rule is no longer going to apply, it would fall to whatever the next applicable rule in the chain would be. So depending on what that looks like, it's gonna determine what the actual impact would be. There was a question I saw around the acknowledgement item or actually it's not an acknowledgement item, it's a config item for the hosted widget version.
Yeah, I answered that in the chat, Brent. It is, but feel free to explain that actually.
Yeah. So this is something that we see a good bit. There are times when, even though if you look at the settings, even when it appears in the settings that your version is on, an allowable version, it's still triggering that item, that upgrade item. The way to kind of, I guess, nudge that so that it updates properly and recognizes that you're on the right version is to go into your actual sign-in page, go to the configure, and you can do. And actually, I've never even tried it without making any changes at all. If you do any change whatsoever, like even just adding a comment in here. So, even if you just do like
if they let it.
Oh yeah, okay. Thank you. I always do that. So if you do anything at all, right, like even just adding an HTML comment in here, if you save this and then publish it, that will clear. Where's my? Oh, there we go. If you save and publish, it won't have any impact on the way that the page renders, but doing that will typically I don't know what exactly is going on behind the scenes there, but it will typically clear up that blocker and get it to recognize that you're on the right version. I've seen that happen with a number of customers where it's sort of falsely thinking that you're on an older version when you're really not. But that's the way to get around that. All right. Let's see. Does anyone else have any questions queued up?
Yeah. There was one question regarding the LDAP, and it shouldn't have an effect on the upgrade. It was answered. If it was sitting there for a while, and we don't want you to be sitting on the edge of your seat and fall. So it would not have an impact. It should not have an impact, right?
Yeah, and that's true for basically any of the LDAP directory integrations, the Active Directory integrations, those should not be impacted in any way.
Yeah, even if you had a OIN type integration where maybe there's Workday or Salesforce or something that was feeding something into the system, the onboarding, the emails may change, the templates and whatnot, but not the actual integration itself. So you don't have to rework those.
All right, so we had a couple other, we had a couple of other submissions through the community site. I guess if we don't have any other live questions ready, we can address some of those. So first question here is there a way to suppress the prompt to select the default factor or MFA prompt on the first time login after upgrade? I guess this is specifically in reference to service accounts that are set up never to get challenged when they're in the network zone. So let me tackle this for two different things. So one, if a user is required to provide anything other than just password, then the first time they log in after the upgrade, they will get presented with a screen that looks similar to this. Let me show you. So instead of move this out of the way. There we go. Is this my? Yeah. No, that's the wrong one. This is my OIE tenant. Instead of like it defaulting automatically to their last used authenticator, it will, let's do somebody different here. They're going to see something like this, cancel, where it's just going to show them all of their enrolled authenticators and they'll select which one they want to use. Now, for the specific scenario that's described here around service accounts, as long as the policies, the auth policies that are associated to those accounts do not require anything beyond password, then the service account should not see that, because they would not get prompt. They would, just provide password, or they would not get prompted for any other authenticator. So there would be no need to ask them for any other authenticator. If you're seeing issues with service accounts getting tripped up on login, like particularly with automated scripts or things like that, one thing to potentially investigate is it actually because of an MFA? Like, is it actually because of this type of prompt where they're asking for an MFA factor, or is it something like the security question prompts where they don't have a value, or possibly actually prompting to enroll in a recovery factor like email or phone, and that can be based on your recovery settings. So one of the changes in OIE from Classic is that in OIE there's no longer a distinction between recovery enrollments for like phone and email versus MFA enrollments. Everything just becomes an authenticator in OIE, and you can flag some authenticator types as being available for recovery only or both recovery and authentication. But in either case, all of them are now subject to enrollment policy evaluation. So we do see with some customers where on the first login, even accounts that are not required to provide MFA, or maybe they have other MFA authenticators enrolled, get prompted to enroll in a recovery factor, specifically like a phone or email, because of the self-service recovery being enabled, and because those users did not have any recovery factor in place. So that's might be another thing that you would want to look at as well. Yeah, so hopefully that answered that question. Let me go back to the list here. Rollbacks. Yes, there is a process to roll back for production orgs if like in certain scenarios. So not everything will qualify for a rollback. So if it's just like users don't like this behavior, or you don't like a certain behavior, that's not going to qualify for a rollback. But if there are issues where something's broken and you're not able to access certain applications or what have you, then yes, there is a process for rolling back. There's actually an article. I'll throw this in the chat window. There we go. There is an article that goes into detail around what that process looks like. I'll throw this in the chat window for everyone. So yeah, if you want to be kind of prepared ahead of time for this, you can take a look at that article. It goes through what the process looks like, what qualifies for a rollback, what does not, and what, I guess most importantly, what information support is going to be looking for. So if you want to expedite that process, you can maybe start preparing in advance in case it's needed.
Yeah, that's definitely what I would recommend is, while you're in the process of opening the support case, go ahead and start collecting that information and have that ready. It's several different, screenshots, or you can collect it by using video if you prefer, but configuration screenshots before you do the rollback are pretty vital and needed as a part of the investigation process that we do for like why you needed to roll back. So support is going to ask you for that information before they, proceed to get engineering involved to, press the button. So it expedites it by collecting that information beforehand, essentially while you're on hold.
And I guess as kind of a follow-up on that, this next question here from the community side is advice around configuring backups, including SSO apps before the upgrade. So there's no need to back up all of your applications. So just in generally speaking, the impacts of the upgrade is primarily on the front end of the authentication flow. So the actual authentication into Okta itself. So things like your policies, your authentication policies, the flow of the Okta sign-in page. If you have any customizations to that sign-in flow, whether it's customizations to the Okta-hosted sign-in page, or maybe you have your own custom-built sign-in pages that app teams have developed using APIs or SDKs or whatever. That's where the primary impact is going to be. The downstream SSO integrations are typically not impacted. I guess the caveat there would be there are some app integrations that have sort of advanced integrations beyond just the pure SSO, like the SAML or the WSFed SSO. Like they may have some API-based integrations back into Okta. So Snowflake, for example, has some functionality or has some advanced functionality that does that. There are some others as well. But it's those customized API-based authentication flows where you would really want to make sure that you test those out. As far as recommendations for backups, you don't necessarily need to back up everything, but the best practice recommendation is before you upgrade in your production org, have a preview environment set up in Classic that as closely as possible mirrors your production configuration, at least from a policy framework perspective. So you don't have to have all of your individual apps represented, but you do want to have all of your policy iterations represented. So any different variations of app level sign-on policies, all of your global sign-on policies, your MFA enrollment policies, all that stuff you want to have replicated in a preview environment. And then obviously any customization. So any customized authentication flows, whether it's custom login pages for web apps or custom like command line clients or other utilities that are doing API-based authentication into your tenant. Those kinds of things are the things that you want to make sure that you have replicated in your preview environment, and test through the upgrade process. So ideally, you would have all that configured in Classic, upgrade the preview tenant from Classic to OIE, validate how everything survives through the upgrade process itself, and then you'll have a better idea of what to expect within your production org. Go ahead.
And to make it a little easy for you, what you can do is you can use the Rockstar plugin in Classic. I'll say this again, And the Rockstar Classic and plugin will let you export a lot of your policies and stuff like that. So you don't have to sit there and screenshot everything and then export it out into a CSV file. And so that's really nice. Just it make it easier for you, as well as if you have developers on your team, they can use Terraform and stuff like that to sort of scrape from our API and scrape all that stuff out as well. If you wanted to have a backup, like Brent saying, you don't need to, but if you wanted to, you can definitely use the Okta APIs to scrape a lot of that stuff out and then drop it in Terraform or another place and just have that for your records.
Sort of as a follow-up to that, there's a question about, like, if you have a preview tenant that's already on OIE, is there a way to get that rolled back? No, there's not a way to roll back. We don't typically do rollbacks in preview. The best thing to do there would be you can request a new preview tenant that's specifically on Classic. So you can request that through your account team. Just let them know you want it to be on Classic specifically. Otherwise, the default these days is on OIE when you create new tenants. So, but if you request that through your account team, they should be able to get you a Classic tenant that you could then use to test the upgrade flow itself.
Yep, would highly recommend doing that as well.
So we have another question.
There's a question from Anonymous in there that I'd like to.
Yeah,
so the question is, there's a few items referenced that did not specifically call out what policy or item from our Okta tenant was referencing. So there's no way for us to tell you what exact policy we are seeing or we're calling out. You're just, unfortunately, you're just going to have to go through all your policies and look for that particular one that Brent was talking about. So if you have a, depending on what your blocker is, you'll have to go into all your factor enrollment policies and see if you have both Okta and application selected, or in your and make sure password if your enrollment policy is selected. If you have one of those where it's saying, hey, you don't have a password or all your factors are not being allowed. So you'll have to go through each policy. Unfortunately, there is no way for us to tell you exactly which policy is being affected. So I just want to call that out. So right here, so you'll have to find which policy has either just Okta or application selected. And then if you have a policy where you're denying all MFA enrollments, you'll have to also find that and then possibly change it to optional based on your use case and your authentication flow.
Yeah. Actually, I'm glad that this question came up, because this reminds me of this is the second kind of common question that comes up in the office hours that I did not get to at the beginning of the session. So this is the one where it's called out for non-default MFA policy app condition. And basically what it's talking about is you've got somewhere in your multi-factor factor enrollment rules or policies, you've got a rule, at least one somewhere, that has one or the other. So it's got only Okta and not applications, or only applications and not Okta selected. Kind of to the earlier question, the trigger for this call out is a very broad stroke. Basically, if you have a policy that looks like this, it's going to flag it, regardless of whether there would actually be any impact to you from a functional standpoint. And that's because it's just from a technical perspective, it's very difficult to make that determination. But in reality, for the vast majority of cases, having this configuration in place is actually not going to impact you at all from a functionality standpoint. There's one very specific use case where there would be a change in behavior from OIE versus what you see today in Classic. And that is specifically if your activation flow involves customizing an activation link. So number one, like, your users would have to be activated through clicking on an activation link, as opposed to, say, Active Directory delegated auth, where they just log in with their AD credentials for the first time. If you do that, there will be no impact to you. But if your activation flow involves clicking on an activation link in order to enroll your initial password and activate your account, And that link is customized so that it includes a from URI parameter at the end of it, which would have the user land in like on some downstream application other than the Okta dashboard upon completing the activation flow. If those two things are true, then you would see a change in behavior between what you see today in Classic versus what you would see in OIE after the upgrade. And specifically, the change would be in Classic today, when you have that scenario, when you've got an activation link that includes a from URI to send you downstream somewhere else after the activation flow, that's evaluated as a two-step process. First step is your activation link, which is treated as Okta. Second step is the from URI redirect, which would be down to the applications. But because the first thing that happens in that flow is you hit the Okta activation link, the rule that would evaluate in that scenario would be a rule that has Okta selected, not a rule that has application selected. Now in OIE, once you upgrade, that changes. In OIE, if you had that scenario, that entire flow would be evaluated as a truly SP initiated flow, like a downstream app initiated flow. And in OIE, the rule that would be applicable would be a rule that has application selected, not one that has Okta selected. So that would be where the change of behavior would come into play. It's a very, very edge use case. So for the vast majority of you, there's no impact at all, and you can safely acknowledge that item and be good to go. All right. I don't see any other questions out there. We've got a few minutes left in our time today. Any last questions from anyone before we wrap up for the day, or any comments or items from any of the panelists that you want to call out before we wrap up for the day?
No, I think that the biggest recommendation is trying to go through and unit test as much as possible. If you have any customizations, we do make make it seem like it's a daunting task, but a lot of our customers we're upgrading thousands of upgrades with very little impact. So even though there's some validators out there, if you do have customizations, just being able to find the right place to test them out, like the custom login page to go through and test those policies. But a lot of it is uneventful. We do get hit with the brunt of, oh, there's a different policy framework in the lower environments than in the upper environments. So we just want to make sure you have an adequate test.
All right. So I guess before we wrap up, I do want to call out.
Hey, Brent, hold on just a sec. Someone asked for a minute. They want to review. They have any more questions? So.
Okay. Yep. While we're waiting there, I'll call out some resources that are available to you guys. So we've got our OIE upgrade hub. So you can screenshot this or whatever and capture these QR codes for these various resources. But the upgrade hub will have links to knowledge base articles, link to the community site where you can sign up for office hours, one-on-one office hour sessions with us, and a link to our YouTube playlist that has recordings of these webinars, as well as some other helpful OIE related content. Our developer hub, if you have any custom development, is a place to go for information on API changes, new OIE SDKs, sign-in widget info, and other developer resources. The knowledge base hub has articles around all of the eligibility callouts and config items, any feature changes between Classic and OIE. Also has an upgrade test plan template that you can use to kind of help guide your testing strategy. And then our community site, where again, you can find a link to sign up for office hours. You can post questions there directly in the forum, and you'll also get announcements about upcoming events like these webinars, for example. All right.
Hey, Wilden, if you like, I can just unmute you and then you don't have to type out your question. If that's okay, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll go ahead and unmute you. Then I'll let you talk. Cool. Go ahead. You should be able to talk and ask your question.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep.
Thanks. Good. I was trying to type. I got in here. My engineer was supposed to be in here today, and he had another issue, and he wasn't here. So I'm trying to go through our list of questions. We got the custom sign-in page saying we had a vanity URL, but again, it doesn't say which vanity URL. You know, and a lot of customers like us get from you all the login dot or that as a kind of a vanity login URL. Is that referencing that vanity URL, or is it another vanity URL that we've created? And the reason why I ask this, and not to say that I don't know mine, we inherit my group. This is we own two tenants, and this tenant's owned by another person who inherited it from a group who's no longer with our company anymore. And so that it's been operating for the last few years as it was built, and not as we should know it. And so I don't know how all the information there, you know, and I don't have the admin access to go look all that. So I'm trying to get some generic information, see if y'all can help us, or I have to go to them to ask. So I know it may seem like I don't know it, and there's that reason. That's why I want to give it to you. So yeah, it's asking for a vanity URL, saying we have a custom sign-in page. We have a vanity URL, but it doesn't tell us that. And I didn't know if that would pop up for the generic URL for end user logins that you have.
So is it calling out the widget version or customization on the sign-in page? Is that?
Give me 1 second. I've got this broken out into a spreadsheet with each of the slides. It says deployment model - customized Okta-hosted SIW.
Okay. Yeah. So that's calling out that you have so that would not be your, company name.okta.com.
Yeah.
There's no ability to do any customization on this one. This is always just out of the box. The only place where you can do any customization at all would be the custom one. And you can see that if you go under customizations and brands, you'll see all of the brands that have been created and then the domains that are associated with those. So you should be able to see all of those there. And that call out specifically, that sounds like it came from a report that was given to you by maybe your account team, I'm guessing.
Yes. Yes.
So that's just calling out. That is not even necessarily calling out that there are any changes here that you would be concerned about. It's just calling out the fact that you have this configured, so you might want to take a look at it. You can also double check by going to your dashboard and going to the self-service hub and see if you actually have this called out. This would let you know that there has been some change from the default page on the customized brand. So if you see this, then you would want to go back to that section that I just showed you under customizations, brands, go to that domain, and then go to your sign-in page.
Yes.
This is where that code is. So this is where it may not be anything. It could be something as trivial as a comment, or maybe like change in the style of the page or whatever. But to be safe, what you can do is just copy this code and paste it into even a developer org that's on OIE, just to validate that it functions in an OIE environment.
It sounded like he was saying that the blocker was customer hosted sign-in widget. So that might be it. I think that's what I was hearing. Is that right? Well done.
It said customized Okta-hosted SIW.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It didn't say, but it is our customer based. This is our customer focused one. So I don't know. I didn't build this one out. We built our internal one.
It's all good. Yeah, that's more common than you might think. Don't worry. No, Brent nailed it. Then I thought you said customer hosted, but it's custom Okta hosted. So.
Yeah, customized Okta hosted SIW.
Yeah, he's nailed it then.
And I'm sorry, I'm the program manager, not the engineer. So
no worries.
No worries.
And you said this right here on the pages is we can go in and look under the brands and look at the specific code for it then.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
To future-proof this. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
To future-proof this, actually, we should actually show what Andy was talking about. So if you wanted to show the course page and tell people how they can find where their customer hosted stuff is, that would be probably a good thing to do as well.
Yep. So if you want to know whether or not you have any like self-hosted, customer-hosted, custom login pages,
Yeah.
like custom widgets specifically. If you go under security and API and look at trusted origins, and you want to find anything that is enabled for cores, this would be a requirement in order for any self-hosted widget to function. So if you don't have anything here, then you have nothing to worry about. If you do have some things here, then you might want to take a look at what URLs specifically are registered for cores. And if you know who would own those URLs, reach out to those teams and make sure that they have an opportunity to test against an OIE environment.
Great.
All right.
That's it. Appreciate it. Thank you. I think
Yep.
I'll give you, if you can give me just one more second.
Yep.
Try and go through all my questions. There's a warning. Yeah, because I think there's a couple of them I have to get back with our team. We asked them, they're like, send us here, and they didn't know which specific questions I had. Now it looks like I need to go back to them. So sign in widgets.
Just FYI, there is so we do have one-on-one office hours groups available as well. If you have more questions, or if you'd like to get your engineers on to ask the questions as well, I'll throw this in the chat window. This is the link to our community site. From this site, you'll see links to our office hours. So you can go here and click on this link for one-on-one office hours and schedule a session, one-on-one session with a member of the team to go through any questions you have.
Okay, great. No, that helps. That helps a lot. So we can look at that this afternoon and determine that.
All right.
All right.
All right. Well, we are a couple minutes over time. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for all the great questions. All our panelists. Thanks everybody for joining and for tackling all the questions. And we will look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.
Cheers, guys.